And so welcome everybody. I see there's a couple people who found their way over. So thank you for your patience. It
Hey
took us a
everyone.
few minutes early or later than usual, but we are here. And I think this is going to be our new time slot, which is more of a morning time slot for where we are located. So hopefully it works better for our viewers.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thanks everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Still kind of working it through. Like Becky said, sometimes you just have to just roll with the punches and just do the best that you can. Given sometimes you just can't predict life, right? And unfortunately, you know, um, that's something that I think we will really kind of get into and really kind of talk about sometimes when we can't, like, this is an external thing, but sometimes what happens when it's an internal thing. So that's kind of one of the things that we'll get into. So again, I'm Kusal Matthew of Koos is Key. This is Becky Lee. Um, and Becky has we did an awesome live 2 weeks ago, and it just felt so natural. We had one person who was really engaged. So anyone watching, go ahead, please. Put comments, be super engaged with us, so that way we can interact with you and we can really make this all about you all on the other side.
And we'll make time for questions during and after as well. So I have my laptop open as well, so I can sort of monitor. I'm sure you do too, so we can watch the questions. But yeah, welcome everybody. Thank you for the introduction. We are here to talk about stepping outside of fear because I think it's something that everybody goes through at different points in their life. Like daily, there's little fears that come up, and we get to choose to take the scenic route, which takes us back through that spiral of learning again and maybe the difficulties and, being a martyr in our fear. Or we get to choose to take that fear head on and be like, okay, how am I going to challenge this? I can do this. I can do this.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I think it's important to, like you said, that I can do it. Like I think it's tough, Becky. I think as we kind of get into embracing fear, and like we just really talk about that next, like running towards it, understanding it. I think it's really going to be cool for people on the other side because as we kind of talked through in the first live when we went over intuition, one thing we were really good at is kind of talking about it in a spiritual and energy and also kind of logic and how what we're talking about, it's a feeling, it's really kind of hard to decipher, and I think how I feel it and how you feel it might be a little different.
hmm No, it's really true. And, it all comes down to the tangibility versus, understanding what is a preconceived like pattern within our subconscious mind. Because a lot of fears come from our childhood. And we may not even be consciously aware of it. It's like the difference between being a conscious creator and an unconscious creator. It's a conscious fear and an unconscious fear. Something that I learned, I studied a lot of psychology. I actually wanted to be a psychologist when I was young, and I never did that. But I
Me too,
study
actually. That's
now
cool.
holistic psychology, like the mapping of the brain, all of that thing. And the cool thing is my daughter is going in to be a psych nurse when she's done high school. So psychology, I love it. It's like
Yeah.
learning that. But understanding that we are only born with two fears. It's the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. Those are the only two fears that are embedded in our nervous system as babies. The rest are learned. The rest are learned
I
fears.
literally just saw a video on that today. Like, I literally
Synchronistic.
just on my, like, Instagram, I had a YouTube, like a For You page, showing, and it literally said that, the fear of falling, and what was the other one?
The fear of loud noises. So if you've ever noticed a baby, if they hear loud noises, they
Mm,
tense up, whether they're conscious of it or not. Their physiology knows that fear. So from a physiological standpoint, as young children and older adults, as we go through traumatic events, whether they're life threatening or not, like emotionally traumatic, physically traumatic, it imprints in our nervous system and it creates these fears within us. And then if we are in a circumstance that our body deems that it feels the same, even though it may not be the same,
mhm.
our like we react to that fear and we shut down. It's like the fight or flight, right? And that's how
Yeah,
our physiology works with that.
interesting. So that's interesting how the loud noises kinda trigger that, and honestly, I think fight or flight is definitely a huge part of fear. I think learning how to respond, and you know, I think with me, I used to do taekwondo, and it was kind of learning how, like, there's someone kicking you and learning how to respond in the right way, and it's not just about you know because if you just react, you're going to shut down, and it's learning how to kind of work through the fear response in that moment to then be able to like counterattack.
Yeah, it's about the pre-planning, it's about being proactive and not reactive, and that's what martial arts are so powerful. They teach people that. It's like, how can you use the power of your mind, working with the power of your muscles and your physiology to outsmart and outpower somebody?
Yeah, I think it's kind of using that fight or flight. It's kind of using your safety. It's also the intention. Like I think you know the topic today. I think we said what facing your fear and kind of embracing it. And I think once you go through that process of embracing your fears, you're going to realize that there's a part of you that might stop you, and that's kind of where the self-sabotage part I think we're going to kind of talk about.
Yep.
And to your point, that mental mind aspect of it, to bring up martial arts again, Mr. Miyagi. I use a quote with my daughter, and he talks about, like, you know, if you're walking on the side of the road, on one side, you're safe. On the other side, you're safe. But if you're stuck in the middle, you're gonna get squashed like a grape. You're just gonna get crushed. And I think one thing I found with my embracing my fear and also working on the self-sabotage aspect of it was whenever I was like a hell yes, that fear didn't consume me as much. And I was able to just endure a little bit more than when I was just a little wishy-washy. And most of my life I felt like I've just been a little wishy-washy, like
Yeah.
it just worked where I was able to, progress and not have all those like self-sabotagingness because I just committed.
Yeah, and that's so cool. Actually, and what I want when you post this video after, put a link to the previous video in here because I want viewers to go back because this all goes into your intuition and following your guidance as well. Like that hell yeah, that F yeah versus the yeah. You can ask yourself, is this a true yeah or is it a yeah out of not knowing how you can control the outcome? If it's something that's pulling you in and you're like, I have to do this, do it, but do it mindfully, right? Follow that intuition. Are you doing it out of fear? You don't want to do something out of fear, even if you
Exactly.
have a fear for it. You want to do it out of that drive, that inspired action. And inspired action will feel not scary. It'll feel like you'll feel it like this blast of energy to do it. You'll all of a sudden have all these ideas come to you and you'll just be like, okay, this is how I work through it. One of
Yeah.
the one of the things I like to teach when I work with clients is, anybody who's successful in life, there's no difference between them and anybody who's not successful in where they want to be, other than they believe in themselves and they're not scared to believe in themselves and know that they can be wrong, but learning from those wrongs that happen because it's just perceived wrong, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of us as kids were told, oh, you can't do that. Oh, that's scary. And then that creates fears in us as little kids. And we grow up with those fears. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I know for me, it was like, you can't public speak. Oh my gosh, my mom was very shy. And so I grew up with that. And yes, I'm shy in situations, but I can get up and speak in front of lots of people. If
Yeah.
I'm a subject matter knowledge, I have no issue with it. If you throw me out in front of a bunch of people and like give me a topic to talk about, I could probably do it, but I'd be a little more scared. But yeah, it's about understanding and overcoming them and knowing that voice in your head. I call it the nasty voice, the angry voice that's like, oh, you can't do that. Oh, you're stupid. Oh, you're this, you're that. And it's like, no, tell it to be quiet. Tell
Yeah.
that voice to be quiet.
Yeah, no, I think it's hard, right? When you didn't see the example or you saw the example of not, you kind of like limit your own self. And I think to what you said earlier was, a lot of our fear is stemmed from situations where we're either falling or those loud noises. So anything else out of that instinctually might be something that's, programmed or something that we learned from other people or from other situations. So to your point, like I need to tell myself, am I falling? Am I hearing loud noises? If it's not, then it's something that I might just need to like unprogram. That's kind of, oh, are you back?
When we realize that, when we feel these fears, when we're in this space, when you can be logical enough to pull yourself out of that and be like, why am I feeling this? What is making me feel this? Sorry, I did not put my phone on do not disturb, and I should have. Duh. But it's like, ask yourself, why am I afraid? What am I afraid of?
Yeah,
What
I hear
am
you. I don't see you.
Yeah, I know I'm frozen. It's probably because I had a call come in. Oh, man. Oh, well, as
Is
long as you can hear me, I'll come back. I can be black screen for a little bit. But yeah, asking
okay.
yourself, asking your physiology, why am I feeling this way? What is the root cause of this fear? And like for me, I used to have this fear of not being good enough. And I think a lot of people carry that around. So to counteract that, we will look for attention in the wrong ways. We will doubt ourselves. We will not try things because we're afraid that if we fail, it will be pointed back at us. Where in reality, when you start to believe in yourself and understand that you are worthy, whole, and complete, and you can do anything you put your mind to, and a failure is just a perceived failure. You're
Yeah.
learning in the process. Like, how many times have we failed? If you're a little kid or you have a child, teaching your child to
Yeah.
ride a bike. If your kid falls off the bike, are you just gonna be like, "You're done. You suck. Don't ever try again."
Exactly. It's gonna be like you're safe, you're okay, keep going at it. And I think, that aha moment when it clicks, like it's worth all the falls, because I think they realize that they can and like they figure out the muscle memory. And but you're right, like it's hard when we're overwhelmed by sometimes that fear. And I think, for most people, the hard part is sometimes the self-sabotage is um it is. I'm trying to figure out how I can get you back.
So what I'm thinking is maybe I will exit out and rejoin again. So just give
Okay.
us a second because it's not getting better.
Yeah,
So I'll
take
be
your
right back.
time. What I'll do is I'll just put a comment in here too, just letting people know, and or
And actually, anybody watching this, comment in the comment box what one of your biggest fears is, whether it's a perceived or a real fear. I'd love to see the fears that come up in people because this is how we work through them. I'll be right back though.
thank you so much. Becky will join again soon. We are having tech issues. Hey y'all, what's going on? Fear of changing jobs. You know what, Melinda? I can understand that so much. And I'll wait, for Becky, and I'm hoping she'll be able to join in really soon. Um, and here, let me just send her the link. But I think that's a great thing because for me, the biggest issue that I had was it was the fear of change. It was this is what I was comfortable with. This is what I knew. And I think realizing that so many aspects of my life was going to change. The people in my life who sometimes you spend more time than your family. Um, you're gonna spend more time with them than, like sometimes your extended family. And then from there, losing that foundation and village. Then it's going into a new place. um what happens is once you go to a new place, there's all the fear of like all the new changes. Am I learning enough? Am I understanding everything? And I think I'm going back to school right now, and one thing I learned about like health technology and just and people using it in the medical field, a lot of it is they're just afraid of learning the job. They're afraid of hurting someone else. So I think um, my recommendation is if you're afraid of changing careers, I think it's realizing that you're meant for something more, and it's okay to believe and go for it. But I think maybe being a little bit more methodical, like what are the foundations that I'm looking for? Like what skills do I want to leverage? Because I think jobs are transferable. And I think anyone, if they want to change or grow, I think sometimes embracing the fear and going towards it is really important because that's how growth happens. And then once all the changes happen, you're back to a normal, you'll realize, hey, I was able to edit, delete a lot of the baggage I was carrying, and I have a fresh start, And then you're able to really go towards it. Does that make any sense? And Becky, we had one of the viewers, she mentioned how the fear of changing jobs was something that was keeping her back.
Yeah, and I read that, and I think that's so great. You have a great answer there, and it just asking, from a spiritual or like a conscious perspective, ask yourself why you're afraid. Ask yourself what actually lights your soul up. Are you feeling drained from your job? Because sometimes we can just go in and change our mindset about the current job we're in. Maybe it's a job that's not fulfilling you anymore. Ask yourself, write things down, journal. You'd be amazed the messages that come out and the guidance. Ask for guidance. I was on the cusp of disliking my career for a long time, and I was like asking for signs, and part of me knew that I'd be working on my own and from home at some point, and I did not know how. I just set the intention, and then the big C happened. COVID happened, and I
Mm,
got laid off from my job, and it was like disastrous, but it was actually like a godsend in the fact that I got a payout from it. I was able to redirect my life during that time in Canada. We were able to put our mortgage payments on hold. I was able to put all my debt repayment on hold for like 10
wow.
months. So I'm like, I can easily live. I can go back to school. I can learn. And it's about following that guidance. I didn't fight it. It's the Wu Wei. Whenever I'm facing fear, I think of Wu Wei. So the Tao Te Ching this is one of the biggest lessons I've learned from it. It's effortless effort. That's about what it translates to in the English language. It's about going but not pushing. Because when we
Mm,
push, we repel. So think of yourself in a river. If you're swimming upstream, you're exhausting yourself. So if you're overthinking, if you're overanalyzing, you're out of touch with your intuition then. If you just sit silent and ask yourself these questions, why am I feeling like I need to change my job? Why am I feeling like I need to like start a new career? The answers will come to you, and open up to receive the guidance, and it will come, and the synchronicities will start coming, and the right people will start coming into your existence. Sort of like Kusal and I, we like live on different sides of North America, like opposite ends, and we've connected, and now we're sharing,
yeah.
with the collective, and it's beautiful. It's like opening up for these opportunities.
And
That's one of the biggest things.
I think that's beautiful. And I think, for me too, Melinda, like, I think I was stuck for some time. And I think I kept asking or putting other people's thoughts and feelings and saying, "Hey, what do you think?" And I didn't ask myself, "What did I think?" But I think finally leaving and going to one company that didn't quite work, but it gave me some skill sets, then took me to a global, like, where I got all the opportunities, but the first one wasn't the right one, but I had to find my home. I got let go right when this kind of like recession, this kind of period that started last year, and I kind of did the same thing. And I pivoted on my life, and I followed my intuition. I went for it, but all the things that life has given me, the opportunities, the things I learned at work, I realized were experiences. And it's kind of like Slumdog Millionaire. They beat him up like, "How did you get this, $1 million?" He's like, "That was just my life. It was a bunch of synchronistic situations where you were able to, I think I just made up a word, but you were able to essentially, you know, use all these experiences to move you forward." And I just realized that for some time I was stuck. And I was doing everything in my power to keep me stuck because that's what I knew. So I was drinking, or I was using too much, marijuana. I was overeating. I was just self indulging just to keep myself numb, to not hear why I wanted this change. And I
I
think
love that.
once I was able to slowly say, "Hey, I'm killing myself. I'm killing myself because I'm making everyone else happy, but I'm not living up to my own potential." And, so before I kind of, jump into it, I want to kind of give few examples that I found that were true examples of self-sabotage that I don't think I really understood. Procrastination, perfectionism, self-doubt, overthinking, which I did, people pleasing, that me too, negative self-talk, avoidance, and self-sabotaging relationships. I didn't realize that a lot of those things that were going on were just my way of some sort of cognitive bias or confirmation or cognitive dissonance that just put me into believing something that wasn't true.
Yeah, and those are what I call the scenic route. It's like we get on that spiral and we become a self-fulfilling prophecy of ourselves. And thank you for sharing that. Like I say it's beautiful like because when we look back at these times where we realize we were self-sabotaging, it is beautiful. It's a gift. So when we get back into that space of complacency, we can be like, "Hey, this does not feel right. This feels out of alignment again. I'm starting to like regress and I need to pull myself back into like progress." Because like we're human. There's always going to be moments where you self-sabotage, where you want to lay and scroll on your phone for 5 hours, and that's okay once in a while, but know when it's not serving you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good topic of when it's like filling up your cup. Like are you letting everyone drink out of the cup, and by the time you drink, you're like you have no water for yourself. And I think I was doing everything to just survive and exist opposed to thriving and living. you know and and I think the hard part is, to me, because of that self-sabotage and that feeling of inadequacy or whatever it was. I mean, to each of our own, it's going to be different, but that kept me there and I was comfortable with it. I knew it. And I think embracing the change was as scary as sometimes staying in the hell. And so I think learning how to embrace change will help break the monotony, and I think that's probably one thing that will help. Another thing is, build a village. So one thing I will do is, this is not the right live that we originally promoted. So I'm gonna put all of Becky's links and socials right in here. So if you ever want to work with her or just kind of get that one-on-one, it will be right here after this is published, or just go to the other one that will eventually get deleted, but and will be moved here. But I think knowing that our experience isn't unique, and we're in this silo really helps. And I appreciate you saying that. I express sometimes some of the feelings that you're going through, and I want you to know, like, when I was going through it, I felt so alone and I felt isolated, and all the people that were there for me, I sometimes felt ashamed to even bring them in, because to the world my life was great. I just went to school. I got my MBA. I was making great money. I had a good family, even though I was divorcing and all that stuff. Like, people don't understand the thing, and sometimes it's hard to bring people in when you're just in a lot of pain and you don't know where that pain's coming from.
Well, we lose connection with ourselves. And that's, what they say, any addiction, any type of addiction, the opposing factor of it to cure it is connection. Connection with oneself, connection with a higher energy, whether it's God, universe, source, whatever that is, connection with community. That's why communities like AA, NA, those types of things really assist people in reconnecting with themselves. And it becomes like self-sabotage becomes an addiction because you almost get a dopamine drip from it, because you're almost like challenging yourself and being a rebel, and you're like, well, I don't need to do that. I'm successful as I am, like, and I'm just from my own experience, because I'd be like, F that, like, I don't need to listen to what anybody says, because that was most of my mindset for most of my life.
Yeah.
And I lived a fine life, I was successful in this, but it's like I wasn't feeling fulfilled in life,
Same.
and I wasn't leading my soul's purpose. I wasn't helping others and serving others, I was serving myself.
Yeah. I got chills from that. 'Cause yeah, 100%, Becky. And I think, you know, that was a lot of my experience too. And as we kind of talked about embracing the fear, so, when you were going through that, how did you slowly start on embracing the fear? Like, and then stopping the cycle of that self sabotage?
So first of all, I started cutting people out of my life that weren't serving the life that I was creating. I'm sort of like a lone entity kind of thing, but I've learned that that was my protection mechanism. So I started allowing different people in, but I cut the ones out that were keeping me stagnant. Not in a judgmental way. I just knew it wasn't serving anymore. And what I did is I really started meditating. I started taking care of myself again, not just my physical body, but my mind. I would actually tell myself to stop when I get in like anxiety cycles.
Mm.
And I would start to understand the power I held over that. Like we can overcome anything. I
Yeah.
started to um like cure and put a lot of my I had a few autoimmune diseases which were caused by a lot of that
Mm.
fear and that anguish I held on to because that's what your body does. So I actually started to reverse those, and my
Wow.
doctor was even like, "How did you do this?" And I'm like, "Nah, my mind." Like honestly, it was my mind. I removed a whole bunch of garbage from my life, and I removed a whole bunch of garbage from the inside of my life and started filling and planting seeds of love and compassion and self-worth and self-love. And not
Wow.
self-love where you go to the spa, but self-love where I'm actually like, I love me. I am amazing. I am,
Yeah.
and not in an egotistical way. And I'd be like, people like me because I grew up with people always fighting me and not like I never fit in. It's like people appreciate me. And it started to change as we shift inside, the outside starts to change.
Yeah.
So people started showing up differently in my life. I started accepting myself because that was
Wow.
one of my biggest fears. And people on the outside started accepting me. And I was like, oh, there's something to this mindset work.
So what I think I heard you say is when you were going through that period, one of the things when you were feeling that is you were able to almost see that cognitive triangle and work through like how can you break it? How can you change the flow of your thought triangle, you know? And then I think the next thing what I heard you say is you were able to identify and figure out the people in your life that were not healthy and not boosting you to finally maybe build your intuition, find that safety, and then you were able to slowly find what you said last week. That word really worked. Your soul village, and then you were able to kind of work on the soul village, and then finally, through that whole experience, you found your self love, and then you were able to embrace the self love. Is that kind of what I heard?
Yeah, and it's like embracing that. That's a very good like breakdown of what I said. And it's once we step into that self-love and realize that nothing can shake us from that. We are our own foundation. If we're building our foundation on the thoughts and feelings and judgments of others, we're building a house on sand ultimately,
Mhm.
and it's going to get swept away. We have to build our roots and plant our roots and grow them into the soil ourselves. And through that, by supporting other people around us, but not in a codependent way, by supporting ourselves first, like you said, filling your cup first. That is so important. And just having like a spiritual practice is really huge. And it doesn't have to be a religious spiritual practice, but even if it's just going for a walk every day and connecting with yourself and nature.
Yeah. No, I think it's really powerful. Just connecting with yourself and breaking the codependent aspect, or just the dopamine fix of wanting to be connected or learning from someone else. And I love that. And I think we do have a lot more to talk about. But I think as a segue, maybe in like our next live, one thing we could do is maybe talk about like those like inner child wounds, or some of those inner wounds that we have that we carry that might be impacting us. So I think maybe for a couple of weeks that might be a good segue. Between like because first we talk about intuition, and then from intuition, it's kind of like learning how that quiet voice and that energy that we have and how can we kind of embrace it. And now we're talking about, hey, we're gonna go towards something, and the fear is going to be there, but hey, that self-sabotage is shutting you down. So I think it just sounds like the next thing is figuring out where that block might be coming from, right?
I love that. That's a very natural progression. I'll get prepared. I used to teach a course on those core wounds because there's like a list of core wounds that everybody has, and then there's like it's like the core feelings we feel, and then there's offshoots of each one. So I'll come prepared with that next week,
Yeah.
and we can go through, or in 2 weeks, and we can go through that. But it's so true. Like we when we quiet that nasty voice, that angry voice, that fear voice, and we connect to our intuition, and we love ourselves, and we trust ourselves enough, there's nothing we should fear. It's like when people talk about needing protection from others, we honestly do not. If we trust our energy and trust ourselves and open our heart and trust our heart, nothing but good things are going to come to us. And when things are discordant that come to us, we know we can just send them love and send them away. That's how we transmute energy. Alchemy, that's energetic alchemy. That's all about it. Instead of sending garbage and hate back at people who send it at us, we send them love.
Mhm.
And we send ourselves love and we balance that and we transmute those energies.
So, just to play devil's advocate, I mean, I think one of the topics we talked about is embracing fear. And sometimes when you're stuck in fear and you have some people that, use that anger, that negativity, and sometimes to me, that fear shut me down. And that's where some of my people pleasing came in. So, so I think, to me, I had to learn how to set boundaries. And you kind of mentioned that yourself. So, at what point do you learn how to push back when you say, hey, homie, don't play like that, like back in the day I didn't say that, but now I make sure, like, I'll check someone to just know, like, that was a little much, like, you know I'm okay, I'm a nice gentle like giant, but even though I'm not a giant, I'm like 5 8, but like, but it's more of like, I am like, I didn't like that, and I just need to make sure that. And back in the day, I used to just take it, and I don't always say it, but there's just a moment I'm just like, I need to say something.
Well, you know that about yourself. You've learned that about yourself. So that's huge. And that is one of the biggest facets of self-love is having those loving boundaries and setting them, because people are either going to follow suit with them or they're going to fall away, and you'll know who's meant to be with you, right? Like when it comes to family dynamics and you set those boundaries, and if they keep pushing them, sometimes you have to back off. With
Yeah,
friends and other people, you can just be like, I'm unplugging for a bit. If you don't respect the boundaries I set, like somebody who wants to come to your house all the time or phones you 30 times a day, it's like, no, this is not working for me. Let's have one conversation a day. Let's cut our text
yeah,
messages back. I need to focus on other things. And you know what? If they truly love and respect you, and if you truly love and respect yourself,
they'll
that will be
understand.
mirrored back to you. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's the key. Is most people, and I think that's great. Is I think what you said is when you set that boundary, if they're meant for you, they're good for you, they will stick around. They will understand it, respect it, and they'll learn this is a give and take. All right, I am giving too much or I'm taking too much. How can we find an equilibrium? But I think the hard part that I'm finding, especially like I used to be a leader in my corporate America days, and then like, and even like an exec, I had people that I had to direct, but there was a younger generations, the Gen Zs and the millennial. I'm a older millennial. The ones below that, the alphas, but like they were brought up with a lot less communication and a lot more of that social aspect. So sometimes they shut down and they don't always communicate. They just ghost. Because you've heard about ghosting and people like, like they have relationships like for years, and sometimes the fucking person just ghosts and like text, I'm done. And so I think, setting boundaries is good, but I think for people who are the avoidant style, because I'm more the anxious, type of attachment style, then there's the, disorganized that is just a cluster of everything, and I'm not even going to get into it because I might say something a little offensive because I'm not saying it in the most polite way. But I'm the more anxious one. But I think with the avoidance, it's hard because I think you don't always get the information, and it's hard to have that back and forth dialogue.
The beautiful thing is we set the intention to what we want to see in our life.
True.
So this is just food for thought. So if we set the intention that somebody's avoidant or we're anxious, we're going to go into a situation with that perception of what
True.
is. So if we go in saying, "Oh, it's going to work out in my favor every time for the highest best good and the highest best good of the other party involved," you're going to start seeing energies like that flow. Everything starts in our mind. So if we this is why I don't like to title. I know when people interview me, they're like, "What's your title? What do you do?" And I'm like, I am me. I'm a soul. I am a guide. This is
Yeah.
what I do. I don't want to put myself in a box. And when we put labels on ourselves or other people, we put ourselves in a box. So
I love
start
that.
seeing people from their soul, who they are.
I I love that. And Melinda, I hope you're still here because you even saw me. I was, the way I was talking, it did still have some of that negative filter. Becky was like, "Hey, bro, like, shine a light on it." I'm like, "Okay, I need to take out the classifications and realizing that we are a multiple duality of a bunch of different, chemistry and emotions and feelings, and we're more than a label." And I
And we're
think sometimes
telepathic.
and I think for that moment, when you're defined by the job or the role, that's what you create everything based on that. And it's hard, like for me when I left corporate America, I just knew I didn't want to go back to what I just didn't want to work for someone who wasn't going to respect my vision. And I didn't care about the job, but I just cared about like my input. And I was willing to wait until it was the right moment. And I think, with that, I've gone into, stocks, and I've gone into, this passion project that's evolving. But ultimately, the way my future is going to look, it's not going to be defined by things. And I think, even as I go back to school, my mom, I'm like, "Mom, I don't know why I'm going back to school right now." She's like, "Are you going to get something out of it?" And I was like, "Yes." And she's like, "Why did you do it?" I was like, "Honestly, I wanted to be more well rounded." So it doesn't matter what you learn. The reason why I'm doing it is for my own intrinsic purpose.
Anything that you go into, if you set the intention it's gonna serve and be positive, you will. It'll come out at some point. I know if I have disagreements with people or something's coming into my consciousness. So when we place labels, this is actually a really great segue. Self-sabotage can be as simple as placing a label on somebody else or ourselves. It can be as simple as going, that person is going to show up in a way that they're, if somebody's always fighty and you go into a situation where this person's going to fight me because it's like what instead of that, that's that angry
Yeah.
voice coming in. Go, this person just needs love, and this person is going to listen more this time, and I'm going to get through to them. And like our minds are so powerful when we realize that, and we get the heck out of our own ways with our thoughts, with our preconceived thoughts and perceptions of people. When we take our glasses off and wipe the films of perception off and clean them
Mhm.
and put them back on with a clean view of what this multiverse actually is and what we can do with our minds
Mhm.
and step into our power, then you realize that you can do anything you want. Anything.
Yeah, I love that. I love the clean view aspect because I think it's the filters and the way that we receive and interact with the universe is really kind of based on those filters. And I think the hard part for most people is they're they're it's hard for them to step out of themselves and see themselves from another perspective. So it's kind of like looking yourself in the mirror. And I know you said, the journey you went on, you were able to just find, kind of that, inner self love. And let me tell you an embarrassing story about how I had to kind of find mine on my 37th birthday. I went somewhere where mushrooms is a little bit more okay, and I'm not gonna get into it, but I went on kind of a medical grade experience because it can be used to heal, therapy and all. But anyways, I looked in the mirror, which you're not supposed to do until I found self love, and I had to change my perspective through that. But I realized in like later on, I was like, that came from myself. I didn't have to go through that external experience for something for me to feel inside. So I still had to realize that I'm still chasing. There is still a part of me that still feels that I'm not whole. So even though I cleaned out my filters and I was able to find self love, I still realized that for me to clean the glasses, I needed something else, and I was still giving away my power. And I think it's hard because you're so comfortable in the pain. You're so comfortable in the
Yeah.
the fear, and it's hard to get out of that.
We're calibrated to it. There's a really great analogy about a frog. Have you ever heard the analogy of the frog in the boiling pot of water? Has anybody ever heard that? So I will explain
Explain.
it. I will explain it. If you put an amphibian or throw it in a boiling pot of water, it's going to boil. It's going to die. If you put it in the water cold and slowly heat it up to boiling, it can survive. It acclimatizes to that. Such as our nervous system. If we're constantly living in chaos, if we've constantly been brought up in chaos, we expect chaos. So we create chaos in our external. So what this is why it's so important to deregulate our nervous system, dysregulate it from that chaos. Things like acupuncture is really powerful. Massage can even help, somatic exercises, meditation. Um, but yeah, we need to recalibrate our nervous system to not expect chaos
Yeah.
because we are the projectors for our life. Like, think of yourself sitting in a movie theater. I love to use analogies. Where what you see on the screen is coming from inside you. We are projecting it out. So our expectations, whether they're conscious, our wisdom, like our what's playing behind the scenes in our subconscious mind, whether it's conscious or subconscious, it's all playing on the screen. And you wouldn't go up and start to like try to change that screen on the outside. You got to change what's on the inside. You got to start reprogramming and rewiring what's firing on the inside, create new neural pathways, create new thought patterns.
I, wow. I had that aha moment, So Melinda, I think you and I are both like, mind blown. I like that kind of doing it from the inside. It sparked something that I saw this old video of Tony Robbins, and he was like, you can manifest and create with everything, but like when things come in, you have to have this like internal. He called it KI, like this internal intensity of like feelings, and you're able to grab it and be like, I got this. You push it into the subconscious, and it creates everything else.
You have to
And
be in
I
alignment with it. You have to be in alignment with it. Simple.
Yeah, I like that. I like cleaning out your filter from the inside, not from the outside.
Yeah, because you think of it like self-sabotage is when you have great experiences come to you, but you're not in a place where you can accept them and bring them in. Where you think, oh, a relationship has to be chaotic because that's all, that's passion, that's intensity. Well, no, that's not a healthy relationship, right? Like, we have to understand just because that's what our nervous system has become
Yeah,
acclimatized to, it's not normal. So we have to bring ourselves back down to nothing, strip away all of that, work through it, and understand like a job, what lights you up, what brings you joy, your passion in life. Come back to your soul. Like, our souls have imprints in them, our passions are rooted within our soul, and you will always be called back to it, whether you're open to it or not.
I I love that. I think reconnecting to the soul, and I think that's something. It's foreign for a lot of people, right? I mean, I feel like over time, as we've kind of to your as even I explained, I've desensitized myself with external things. And so sometimes as I'm kind of like embracing this like more sober living, like I'm feeling more, I'm like the intensity is more, but I'm able to desensitize. But ultimately, like my soul feels like it's shining a little bit brightly, but it's not an easy process because it doesn't happen like that. And I feel like that's where I still get discouraged sometimes. And I feel like that's common for everyone. But to your point, when that's all you've known, that's where sometimes for people, that's what they get stuck into, and they create that. And that's where the cognitive bias and the confirmation bias and the cognitive dissonance, the unconscious mind creates a reality in which it thinks it deserves, and
Yeah,
you create that cycle again. So
we're going to reject the good if we're not used to the good. We're going to reject the positive if we're not used to the positive, and we have to start creating it within. Like, it just like physics, on a physics basis. I'm a scientist. On a physics basis, like energy attracts like. And so if you're vibrating at this frequency of like self-hatred and fear and you just hate everything and you're judgmental, you're going to attract that in on the outside. It's about
yeah,
opening our heart and realigning it with our mind and starting to push out that energy so it creates a wave and pulls and boomerangs that energy back to you. That's physics, and this is what our bodies are. We are electromagnetic beings. So we work with that.
I love that. I love that. In the first one in intuition, we talked about the heart chakra, how it creates this this aura, and this energy field. And now we're really talking about, when you, because to me, I really look at a lot of this kind of logically, and but that's where I think, not having to always understand and kind of, to your point, not pushing. And, that, the some sort of Tai Chi that you mentioned, how it talked about how just kind of embracing the now, almost like drifting, like when you
Yeah,
drift, you have to almost turn the opposite way to kind of regain control when
yeah.
you're in the snow or in gravel to kind of turn opposite through the turn, and, you know, but to your point, what you said earlier was when you're not used to it, I think what the first thing that you did was you learned how to find people that were not building you up and that were kind of letting you be in that self destructive, the self sabotaging thing because it served their own purpose. It was kind of like working for them. So I think one of the first things that you said was you cut people out. And I'll be honest, that was one of the first things that I should have done, but that was the last thing that I did. So for me, it was like believing and knowing and kind of understanding my vision and my purpose. But it was like once I finally said no to the boundaries, then like all the other things that you kind of mentioned, like like it just happened. But
It
that
does.
was the first point was cutting out the energy vampires and learning who builds you up and who doesn't. And
And
so
understanding that energy vampirism is only allowed if we allow others to tap into our energy. It all comes down to us. There's nobody to change but self. We allow others to tap into our energy and we can remove it with our intention and our
yeah,
energy work.
and again, I'm using labels because I think for me, I'm still healing and doing some of that final letting go. So I think for me, there was a lot of that pain. And I think, it hurt because a lot of the people that were closest to me were sometimes I realized they were the prisoners that I gave my power to. And so, Melinda, to your point, I think with work, I had like three or four bosses that I gave my entire worth, my career, my knowledge, my corporate review and my raise determined my value. And I would put it on a relationship, or I would then call friends who like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, I put a lot of those decisions on other people. That's where people pleasing is one of the eight topics I mentioned. Again, signs of self sabotage are, again, it's first to an unconscious or conscious actions that undermine our own success, well being, and personal growth. When triggered by fear, experience emotional shutdown, people can engage in numerous activities. And the things that I mentioned were procrastination, perfectionism, self doubt, overthinking, people pleasing, negative self talk, avoidance, and self-sabotaging relationships, which I would say is maybe labeling and judging and putting wrong expectations on those relationships. To Becky's point, that's what I was doing. I was giving my power away, but again, I was putting a label. They were X then, I was less than, and I was putting a filter to that.
Yeah, when we realize that there's nobody going to save us but ourselves, we really start to step into our power. Because I think a lot of times self-sabotaging relationships, we go into them hoping that other person's going to save us or reciprocate what we're giving to them. Because that's what I used to do. I used to like give, 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 or try to save other people when really I needed to work on myself and save myself and give to myself. And not in a selfish way, but just to understand who I am. When we don't
Yeah,
understand who we are, we can't fully understand who other people are because it's all mirrored. And,
100%.
for Melinda's, she talked about dark night of the soul there. It's a birthing process. It's painful. It's like when you plant a seed underground, it's like before the beauty sprouts, there's the pain and the darkness where the seed has to like swell and break apart and the cells have to multiply, or a woman who's pregnant. It's like it's painful. But then when you're done that process and the baby's born, it's like, wow, this is such a miracle. And we have to look at ourselves as worthy of being in that process and coming through the other side and know that no matter where you are in your process, you're still going to come up with things. I still come up with things and have things show up where I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get through this? And it's about centering yourself and asking for the guidance to come through it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Wow, Becky, that was like I'm speechless with that one 'cause I think it's tough, and I think it really is tough, like to find that belief and that faith when you're going through, and I think for women, childbirth is one of the most beautiful, natural, and an amazing props. Like you're literally taking two cells and you're creating life and then you're sustaining it. You're giving up your nutrients to then go through, the birth of process, the pain, and and to go through it the moment you have the baby. Like I think it's beautiful, and I think it's also that's where sometimes they say for women, you become a mother the moment you conceive. For us, men, it's when the baby's born, and but it's that perception change. It's that that moment of like that realization that your life is completely different, and you surrender to that. Hey, my past life has to go, and I can now embrace my future. And
And
I
as a
think that
woman, yeah, that's so powerful. That's so powerful. And as a
but for
woman, with even without knowing, like even as a man, we have it within us. We know, like it's embedded in our DNA how to raise a child. Like we may have no experience and just know this coming into yourself and self-love, we have it embedded in our soul. It's just waiting to be connected to yourself.
yeah, and sometimes like a child was the thing for me, and and I promote everyone to do that. But back to what you said about that inner pain and like that release and like kind of like a part of you kind of like dies in that process of like embracing. I think that kind of goes back to like my and maybe what we can talk about in 2 weeks of the inner child wound. I feel like for me, like whenever I had some of those really intense moments and like my inner child, like I integrated the pain and like what happened, it was like some fucking ugly crying, like, but it
Yeah.
was this overwhelming, this intense pain. And then it just, you have to like, the more you fight it, the more painful it is. But the moment you let it go, it just integrates and it just
Yeah.
connects. And I've heard from a lot of people who have had these blocks and these, like the who go to those breathing seminars and they use, spiritual mediums, or they go to EMDR through their therapist, or Scientology, they use that machines to pull it out of you, or or whatever experience. When you get that inner it, everyone explains it in some sort of like similar way, and the way you explained it reminded me of like that release of inner child wound almost.
Well, it is. It's like the more we hide the monster in our closet or under our bed, the more we push it in, the bigger it gets. And this
Mhm.
is fear. The more we run from things and like pat them down and put our head in the sand, the bigger the energy gets because the fear becomes, it goes from being like a small fear to we sit on it and we fixate on it and then it becomes bigger. The energy, we create this energy bubble of fear around it. And really, every time I face one of my fears, once I've done it, it's almost like, "Oh my gosh, that's like such a relief, and it wasn't that bad." I might
That's
never
it.
do it again, but
Yes.
it wasn't that bad.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. I think the realization of like, "Oh, this is it?"
Yeah,
But
exactly.
that's important because I think if you don't embrace your fear and realize that, what's gonna happen on the other side is what happened to me, is I hit my milestones. I was like, "I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna earn this, and or I'm gonna," and once you do, the same feeling happens. You're like, "Oh, this is it." Is because
Yeah.
like I put too much hope in it and I didn't enjoy the pleasure because I like drained all the happiness by the time I got there. But same with the fear. You give it so much power, by the time you get there, you're so leveled up. You're like, you're like a level 99 RPG player and you're facing a level 5 boss. You're like, fuck, I just wasted 2 hours leveling up or 2 days leveling up when I could have done this in 10 minutes.
Well, it's a destination addiction, right? It's like an addiction like anything. It's self-sabotage when we think we get to the next level, and there's no levels really. It's like the levels that we need to be concerned of are levels of our consciousness and our mind. And what happens is instead of being content and in love with the now, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, finding the beauty and the gratitude in it, we're like, oh, if we just get here, I'm going to be happy then. And then you're like, you get there and you get like your fancy purse or you get like your raise or you get your brand new Mercedes or you know what I mean? And you're like,
Yeah, you get
well,
the
I'm happy
dopamine
for
hit.
10 minutes. And now I'm like, oh, I still feel empty inside.
Yeah, and but that kind of goes back to what we talked about in the last lap. But intuition is that silent, you know, hell yes, it's just so deafening that it just shuts out the rest of our being. And I think to go full circle, it's kind of like, when you realize there's a part of you that you need to work on. I think intuition is what is, that little gauge inside that, the soul's compass. I feel like that's kind of telling you you're off path. The
Yeah.
louder it screams, the more you need to work on it and then listen to it. And the more you run towards it, the fear is going to kind of come out and start shutting you down or making you activated. You're going to go anxious, avoidant or disorganized, or depending on how you feel the fear, you're going to go into what's natural, the fight or flight cycle goes through. And then if it never completes and you're stuck in the cognitive triangle that we kind of talked about, it sounds like that's when you kind of get into, freeze and fawn. You're just completely frozen, unable to move, or you're just idolizing someone, you're giving the fears away. But when you kind of break that cycle, break the habits of the people, you can really kind of create and build and manifest a life because you truly believe it. You let all those old feelings, you kind of clean your limbic system and all the filters, all the negativity kind of goes out. With the toxins in your liver and your kidney, kind of goes the toxins in your body, and I think it's a process.
When anybody gets to the point where they can get themselves out of a trigger and talk themselves out of a trigger instead of going down the path of like, I used to drink a lot or I used to like self-destructive behavior, do really stupid things to see how far I could push my luck. When you get out of that and you ask yourself, why am I feeling the need to run? Why am I feeling the need to fight? And you can rewire your brain, you're creating new neural pathways. That's when you're winning. That's
Mhm.
when you get through that first one and then the rest seem like almost like a challenge where you're like, okay, next time I'm triggered, I know my body's triggered because I understand my physiology. How am I going to work through this
Yeah,
instead of old patterns of self destruction?
I love that. I think it's like you said, it's breaking that cycle, the self destruction, and and learning how to stop the cycle. And and I'm hoping, Melinda, I hope we really help. We met, Jason in the first one that when we did this, and you coming on are probably one of the best things, is because you help make everyone else on the other side who's afraid to communicate, who's afraid to ask for help, who's afraid to set their boundaries, know that we're not alone. And I think your engagement has been amazing, because I think, I hope you are able to achieve your dreams and find the job that satisfies your soul, and then you're able to then find your soul village and work on that, and thank you for sharing, because ultimately I think it's definitely tough, and just know that you're not alone. And if you want to work on more of your intuition, there will be one that we did 2 weeks ago. We'll work a little bit more on the child, the inner child wound, and some more of that stuff, because I think Becky and I went through life in two different ways, but we felt pain and we internalized it in our own different ways. And I think both of us are kind of creating, this forum to get the engagement, to build more people, and have this type of dialogue to make it more normal, and again, I'm going to put Becky's links, in this once this is all done. And she has a great Facebook community of like lots of people posting, and she can give you individual help. And a lot of my content here is more going to be the logical and just the more like, this is boxy, but I'm hoping it can help you too. But ultimately we'll have these lives to really be there for other people, because I think one day you're going to be just like us. You're going to be helping other people. You're going to be making the positive impact. That's what, good karma is. It's making a good deed and putting good into the world, so that way it can break this, the cycles, and the more momentum we do for one another, it just helps. And I want you to know, thank you, because you helped us, And
Thank you.
Becky, I mean, what do you think? I mean, is there anything else that you think we missed or
What I'm gonna leave us
there?
on today is linguistics. I want people to start saying, "I am," I I can, I'm doing, I am. Not I'm trying, not I can't, not, oh, I'm thinking about it. It's I am. I'm there.
I,
Those words are powerful.
all right. So what I heard you say is the I am, I'm doing, and I can,
And I'm there.
and
I'm
I'm
there.
there.
I'm already there. A
I'm
version of
already
me is
there.
already there. If I'm envisioning it, there's a version of me on a different timeline that's already there. I just need to
True.
align with it.
So I am, I can, I'm already there. What was the other one?
I don't remember now.
Okay, it's there. Just rewind it. Just go back a little bit. But again, a lot of it goes to belief and having that faith. And I think there's a lot of times that I wanted to give up in many aspects of my projects, in my own aspects, and sometimes when the fear is so overwhelming, it used to shut me down. So ultimately, just know you're not alone. And I think you're just gonna get a little bit better every day. And I think every day, if you can be intentional, what Becky said earlier about meditating and just what she said, I'm there. I I am whatever you believe. You can do it and that, you will do it, and I think you're gonna be great.
I love everybody. Thank you for being a part of this. Anybody watching now or in the replay, these are around forever. The messages are timeless, and we'll see you guys again in a couple weeks.
Yes, 2 weeks from now, same time. I think we'll do child wounds and and also just we'll expand a little bit more instead of self-sabotage, we'll expand into it. So thank you so much.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks.